Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace. This week's show is with Thomas Jay Oord. He is a best-selling author, and we are discussing his latest book. He signed on last, and I didn't get a chance to figure out how to say this word. The Death of Omnipotence and the Birth of Amipotence. Thank you for joining us, and I am looking forward to all of your comments and questions. If you are on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you are watching on Facebook, grant StreamYard access so we can see your name when you have a comment or question. Please remember to keep all comments and questions related to the show topic and that this is a safe space. Thank you for welcoming us into your home and joining this conversation. I appreciate you all. Let's give a shout out to our top sponsors, Ruth, Kirsten, Michelle, Ray, and Heidi. Thank you so much. I appreciate your support. If you like the show, you can support me by going to my website. There you will find literally dozens of ways and some new pics from a photo shoot I just did. And if you haven't heard, we are doing a live show at the Wild Goose Festival. The festival is July 13th through the 16th. Come watch in person and be part of the show. The Wild Goose is a one-of-a-kind gathering that brings together activists, artists, and seekers from all walks of life to explore justice, spirituality, and community. It's held at Van Hoy Farms in Union Grove, North Carolina, and I would love to see you there. They have engaging workshops, inspiring panels, and interactive experiences. The Goose has something for everyone. As a fireside peep, you will receive $50 off the price of an adult weekend ticket. Use the discount code Sherry so you can get that $50 off. Come be part of the incredible community that's committed to making a positive impact in the world. To get more information and your tickets, go to wildgoosefestival.org. I look forward to seeing you there. Oh, and we are almost at our 100th show. For it, I would like to showcase you. Send me a short video or a few words about what you think of the show and what you have gotten out of it. I would love to hear from you. You can email me at info@sherrypalace.com. And thank you in advance. Okay, enough housekeeping. Let's meet our guest and get smarter. Thomas Jay Oord is a theologian, philosopher, scholar of multi-disciplinary studies. Oord directs the Center for Open and Relational Theology and doctoral students at Northwind Theological Seminary. He is a best-selling and award-winning author who has written or edited more than 30 books. Welcome, Thomas.
Thanks so much, Sherry. I appreciate it. And Wild Goose, I wish I was going just so I could hang out with you and hear you
Right?
do your
Oh, you
thing.
should totally go.
Yeah, I've been in the past, but unfortunately, I'm doing another conference during that time this year, so I have to miss.
Okay, next year.
Sorry. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so let's start us off. How do you say the word you invented?
I say it amipotence.
Amipotence. Okay.
There you go.
That makes
Amipotence.
sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just say that I haven't gotten through the entire book because I have been just so busy. But I love where you're going with this.
Oh.
Through my studies and through everything I've done, I concluded that God has to be the energy of love. Anything else makes him a complete and total asshole. It really looks like that's where you've gotten with this book. What got you there?
Well, I've been thinking about the questions of God's love and power for quite a while, as you know from some of our previous conversations. And this particular book, The Death of Omnipotence and Birth of Amipotence, really, I was trying to do four things. I was
Okay.
trying to make a case from scripture that omnipotence isn't in the Bible. I
Exactly.
was trying to make a case from philosophy that it just doesn't make any sense internally, it's
Yeah.
incoherent. Then I was bringing back some of my arguments I've made from our experience of evil and saying if there's a good and loving God, this God doesn't prevent evil, so we must not think this God is omnipotent. And then
Yeah.
the last one was to try to flesh out this love energy that you're talking about, this idea that if there is a God who exists and is loving, what does that really look like in the world? And I coined this word amipotence, AMI for love, ami, and potence for power. God's power is the power of uncontrolling love.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And how I got love is my religion too.
Ah,
Because any other way just completely contradicts love, right? I mean, people want to use their rage, their judgment, their version of righteousness, and then we put it on God and say, well, okay, how? I mean, the thing that kept registering in my brain throughout all of my process was, what about the kids with cancer in the hospital?
yeah, yeah.
What about the starving children in Africa?
Yep.
What about all of those things? Because that's the way my brain works. I always want to see the other side and see if there's any justification. And there just wasn't, other than human bullshit.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's that problem of evil that got me first thinking about God's power and why I shouldn't say God is all powerful or God is in control. And I'd like to, though, throw out, I was thinking as I was preparing for this conversation, Sherry, that, a lot of people understand the problem of evil as an issue, but I
Mhm.
actually address six other issues, six other reasons why people should reject the idea that God is all powerful, omnipotent. And can I try them on you, sort of
Most
lay them out?
definitely.
Okay. Reason number one, bad politicians.
Ooh,
If God is omnipotent, God either put every politician in place, installed them, or at least allows every politician to stay in place. Every dictator that does rotten things, God is either causing them or allowing them. I think if we get rid of omnipotence, we don't have to make that claim. Number,
okay. So let me push back on you a little bit. Not that I
okay.
believe this, but just that what
Yeah.
people say to me. Um, those kings, those politicians, Trump was used especially for this,
Yes.
were sent by from God. Obama wasn't, but Trump was. Um, and Biden isn't either. But they are sent from God to show, like the kings of the Old Testament, they were flawed, but they were always righteous with God in the end.
Yeah, that's
Personally, I
the
don't buy that. But what do you
I
what
don't
do you say
either.
is that argument to that?
Well, I think people want to give that argument because they feel secure thinking God is in control. They see a
Mm,
bad king, bad leader come along, and they want to say, oh, well, why would a God allow this? And they say, well, it must be God trying to teach us a lesson, or God is punishing us for some sin, etc. But that argument grows really thin when you start to see all the horrible things that have been done by various people over time,
totally.
and especially when you get someone like Donald Trump in power, who's obviously morally flawed. It's really strains credulity to think that God wants that person in power, at least for me.
Well, and the same people say God brings floods when gay rights are approved, but
Yeah.
not when they do something either. It's always the flip. Okay, so number two.
Number two, the Bible. If God is a loving God, and if knowledge of God is important for us to find salvation, however you want to understand salvation, you would think this God would give us scriptures that are crystal clear, without error, relevant to every time and place. But that's not what we have. We
Mm-mm.
have scriptures in the Christian tradition and other traditions that have contradictions, that have inconsistencies. Better to get rid of omnipotence, and then you can actually, I think, value the Bible much more highly, because you don't have to think this was, somehow God dictated or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and it can't be truth if it contradicts each other, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I mean, yeah. You've probably heard as often as I have the excuses people give for when they run across contradictions in the Bible. Everything from, it's not really a contradiction in God's eyes, to, well, God wants to be hidden from us so that we don't know too much about God, to, yada yada. None of those satisfy me.
No, and I mean I've heard, well, God changes his mind. And I said, well, wait a minute, that means growth. that means inconsistency, and that means a lack of perfection. So when you have those things and you're using that argument, it goes completely against the omnipotence.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm actually someone who does think God's knowledge grows and God's experience changes, but I think an only way you can say that is if you give up on the usual view of omnipotence.
Yeah. Do you believe God is a being?
I do.
Okay.
I think God is a universal spirit, and that spirit has what in philosophy we call an ontology. So, yeah, I think God actually is a universal being. Now, obviously, once you say universal being, that's a being of very different type than you and I, who are
Yeah.
in one place. And being spirit, that's also a little different. So, there's going to be some differences, but I'm in the weird group of academics who think God is a being.
Okay. Number three.
Number three, HE double toothpick, hell.
Okay.
It seems like the logic of hell only works if God is omnipotent. That
Yeah.
is, who would really want to go to pain and suffering forever? Only a being who has all power and can force people to go there would make hell some sort of a reality. If you give up on omnipotence, you also can give up on the notion that God's going to force anybody to eternal conscious torment. So get rid of omnipotence.
Well, and the opposite of love would be something like hell. It would be judgment. It would be those types of things. I always go back to being a mom. If I
Mm,
wouldn't doom my own child to hell, then how does a superior being afford the same?
yes.
And why would it need to be worshiped at that point? That's just a child sacrifice, more human flaws.
Yep. I'm sure you're a loving mother, but we've portrayed God as perfectly loving. How is it that you, as a loving mother, wouldn't send your child to hell, but a perfectly loving being would?
Right?
That makes no sense.
Right? I mean, it's like, come on now. Only humans could have thought of this. And love, I mean, I say it every week, love is so hard that it has to be what God is. The
Mm,
judgment, the hatred, the exclusion, all of that is so easy, it doesn't even require thought.
yeah.
But to really be there with love requires pure consciousness, forgiveness, all of those things, as well as putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And
Yep.
that's how I solved um, the baby dying in the hospital, was that if are going to invoke God, that means invoking love and
Mm,
being there for that baby. We are supposed to be that love that is supposed to be here.
yeah. Yeah. I like that.
Okay,
All
number
right.
four.
Number four, evolution. If it's
Okay.
the case that we live in a universe that's roughly 13.8 billion years old, that we are products of an evolutionary process that took long time, and that evolutionary process had lots of pain and suffering, including a bunch of evolutionary dead ends in which species faded out, or
Hmm.
dinosaurs. Why would an omnipotent God put so much extra pain and suffering for non-humans if that God could just zap things into this present state without any sort of effort? If we give up on
Interesting.
omnipotence, then we can
Okay.
think that God has been working through creation the whole time, but never able to zap things to its present form. And the evolutionary process is something that's essential in the coming to be of life as we know it.
Interesting. Okay. Um, Now, how does in, human influence work with that? I had a girlfriend once ask me, because I believe in reincarnation after all of this. And she mockingly said, well, then, why are there more humans and less animals on the planet? And it really sent me into a tailspin going, okay, how am I going to rectify this? And then I realized that most of the death and everything on our planet is caused by humans. So if
Yeah.
humans are doing the fact that things are going extinct and it's our problem, how does that fit into that belief of yours?
Yeah, it fits in the sense that if humans are the ones who are screwing up the planet, killing all the other animals, and God is not omnipotent, then we would understand how God could be loving, because you'd think God would fix that problem single-handedly. If God was omnipotent, God would either destroy humans or would somehow limit humans so they can't kill so many other animals. So, a God who is not omnipotent is a God who is calling upon humans to love all fellow creatures and not dominate the planet in ways that are leading to the extinction of so many other creatures.
So omnipotence equals control.
Yep, I think so.
I mean, and that is control is based out of fear, which is the opposite of love.
That's a
So
good way to put it.
the omnipotent God that people have constructed is not holy or loving.
I
It's
don't
all
think
fear.
so. I mean, I understand how some people will say, well, it is sometimes loving to control others. And what they usually mean is, like, let's say you're going to rescue a child from an oncoming car and you grab that child against their will and you pull them back. And I also think that's a loving act. But in that particular case, we need to bring in another distinction between us and God. Remember earlier I said I think God's a being, but is a universal spirit without localized body. You and I have physical bodies that can sometimes grab children and pull them from traffic. I don't think God has that kind of a body. Now, I think God can call upon us to use our hands to grab children and we can
Exactly.
obey or disobey, but that's different from God having an actual divine hand to grab children.
Well, yeah, because then that goes back to the question of why doesn't he?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, if that, I mean, that's that question, why doesn't God stop evil? I think
Yeah,
has fueled so many, it's fueled my own thinking, but it's fueled so many people to walk away from belief in God at all because they've never even thought about the possibility of giving up omnipotence. They've said to themselves, well, God equals in charge. God didn't stop my brother from getting raped, therefore God must not exist. And I'm proposing we need to get rid of that notion that God is omnipotent and retain the notion that God is loving.
yeah. I have this whole theory that we coined the term God in the ancient minds, trying to understand the true cosmical magical power of love.
Hmm.
And in giving this a name of God is when we started piling on all the bullshit.
Hmm.
Started, saying, well, no, our God is better than your God. It's like a toxic relationship where
Yeah.
you get in, everything's great in the beginning, and then you start to doubt, you start to not trust, you realize they're not as perfect as you thought they
Hmm.
were. All of those things start coming in, and you decide to stay, whether or not because of the love.
Yeah, I like that. There's it reminded me of Christian scriptures that has kind of the theme of our God is bigger than your God. In fact, I attend church sometimes, and there's a song that's from I think one of the Psalms. It says something like, "Our God is greater, our God is stronger," and it's kind of like a battle of the gods.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
football match.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I understand that in one sense. Like, I don't want to believe in a God who is morally imperfect, for
Of
instance.
course.
Um, but the problem is that when we kind of ramp up these metaphysical compliments, and omnipotence is probably the biggest compliment that theologians have given God, we end up saying things that go against our experience of the world. Ends up making sort of painting God into some weird corners. And so, in our attempts to talk about God as being majestic and glorious and awesome, which I'm all for, we need to also remember that our own experience has to be taken into account, including our contributions to the ongoing nature of reality.
And our innate nature to want to put things in a box.
Sure. Yeah. I think we all do it. It's inevitable. Even people
Yeah.
who go around saying, I don't put God in a box, you talk to them for a little while and it turns out, yep, they've got some ideas about God. And so we all do it. I think the question is, what box is the best box? And how do we come
Yeah.
up to that? Yeah.
Well, one with an open lid, hopefully.
That's right. One that we hold lightly, saying, "This is the best I've got, but I'm not confident. I'm not certain about this."
Yeah, I mean, I am fairly certain in the beliefs that I hold right now,
Yeah.
but I say that with a grain of salt because if someone came up and
Yeah.
went, "But," I'd go, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
I mean, when I was an evangelical, I was hard fast in my beliefs. There was nothing or no one that was going to change that.
Yep.
I
Me
was
too.
always a progressive person, but it is what it what it was. And now I embrace the not knowing.
Yeah.
Now it's like, okay, I know there's no way I can know everything. So teach me what you can. And as long as it makes you a more loving person, I'm all for it,
Yeah.
regardless
I
of
like
what it
that.
is.
I like that a lot. My background's similar to yours, and I used to think that the most mature person was the most certain and sure about
And
their
it's
view of
not.
God, and that makes no sense to me. Now, I'm also in circles today in which people try to give me absolute mystery, that God is the total mystery, and we can't say anything or know anything, or it's all the big M. And I have problems with that one too. I want to try to find a model of God that seems to make the most sense. And I start with love
Mhm.
and hold on to that model loosely by saying, I'll
Yeah.
probably make some adjustments to this. I'm not sure it's the right way, but it's a somewhere between absolute certainty and absolute mystery.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we need to try and understand things. I mean, my problem with religion is that there is so much that needs to be taught.
Mm.
When from the moment we are born until we take our last breath, we are looking for love. No one
Ooh.
needs to tell anybody that they should be loved. We just need it.
Mm.
So when you start getting these rules and all of these other things, that's when people start going, whoa, like the don't make me hit you, or, all of the things that, for years I stayed in just this fear. And then I realized that while love can be the most scariest thing on the planet, it is what matters. And so, as long as that is in place, bring all the information you can to me because that's what I want to be.
Man, I'm totally 100% with you, Sherry. And one of the things I do in this last chapter is, as a theologian, I asked the question, what if we start with what you just said, that love is the most important, that, to use more technical language, love is God's primary and logically prior attribute. What
Mm-hmm.
if we start with love and then understand the other things we want to say about God, God's power, God's presence, etc., in light of love? If we do that, it changes the way we think about God and in terms of God's other attributes as well.
Well, and inevitably, it's much easier to put all of the blame or the praise on God as opposed to ourselves.
Yeah, and I'm
If we
against
own
that.
it, then it's a lot harder for people to say, "Well, no, that God," instead of
Yeah,
that you. What were you supposed
yeah,
to do? Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's another problem with omnipotence. If God is truly all powerful, then ultimately everything comes down to what God chooses, and you and me, we don't matter. We're totally insignificant.
And there's no love there.
And exactly. Yep, I'm with you.
Okay, number 5.
Oh, okay. All right, this one might take a little longer to get to, but let me just lay it out here.
Okay.
Um, mm, People I know who are who reject LGBTQ issues, reject queer issues,
Mhm.
think that there's no fluidity when it comes to gender and sexual orientation. Almost, no, not almost. Every single person I know who rejects that has an omnipotent God who thinks that God bangs out these two binaries. These, you're
Cookie
either,
cutters.
yeah, exactly. And because they think like this, because they start with an omnipotent God, they think God can just decide everything the way it's going to be, including our orientations, our genders, our identities. And anybody who is not straight, then they must be rejecting the will of this omnipotent God. If you start like I do with a God of love who's not omnipotent, then you understand gender fluidity. You understand queer because it doesn't have to be one thing or the other. It can be on a spectrum. So I think we can understand LGBTQ plus issues much better if we set aside omnipotence.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I
that's
look at
kind
it
of
from a different view. I look
okay.
at it as, I think it was, my mind just went blank. Anyway, it's a quote where it says, look to nature to understand the trueness of God.
Mm,
And because as soon as I found out that there were gay animals, that
hmm.
changed everything for me.
Yeah, yeah.
Because as soon as you see that God is has created all of this spectrum throughout nature, fish who change sexes on the dime,
Mm,
go in as a female, need to step up as a male. You see it across nature. And as soon as I saw that, it was okay. What is it? Nature loves diversity, society hates it.
yeah.
So as soon as we start putting this, okay, the humans are the top species, and then we are the only ones that discarding all of nature and seeing that spectrum throughout nature, he'd have to be pro-life, or I'm sorry, pro-LGBTQ.
Yeah.
Again,
How's that
he and all
different
that.
from what I'm saying? I think we're agreeing.
Oh, totally.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
All
totally. I'm just adding a different side to it.
okay, gotcha. Yeah, I think we're on the same page there. Yeah. I mean, I suppose a person could make this argument. They could say God is omnipotent. God ordained every single variety, every single diversity and every single point on a spectrum. And this is the, efforts of an omnipotent God. I can understand that argument. I don't agree that God is omnipotent, but I can understand someone making it. That's why I began my little point by saying everyone I know who makes the opposite argument also thinks God is omnipotent. And I
Yeah.
think there's something, a connection between omnipotence and this straight is the only way, lack of gender diverse or diversity, sexual diversity.
Well, and in saying that, because if God created the LGBTQ community, then that would make him flawed.
That's the way they think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense. Again, their views are higher than the higher power that they worship. Right? We
Yeah.
understand God, damn it.
Oh, Lord.
Okay, number 6.
All right, last one. I have a friend who has tells me that for her entire life, she has sought to have a profound religious experience. She grew up like you and me in an evangelical tradition in which occasionally people would talk about these amazing awakening experiences. And they would feel incredibly close to God, all kinds of warmth and love. And she's like, I want that. But
Yeah.
she never experienced it. Never.
I have a friend like that too.
Yeah. So, if God is omnipotent and loving, you would think this God would want to give that kind of experience to those people who are seeking it. This
Yeah.
God wouldn't impose it upon people who aren't seeking it, but for those who want it, you'd think this God would give it to them. If we take out omnipotence, then we have a God who is always active, who does want things, but can't control circumstances to somehow provide that for those who want it. So, religious experiences can make better sense if God is not omnipotent.
So much so because religious experiences tend to put things into a clique and put people higher than others.
Mm,
I didn't have this experience, but like I said, I have a friend, and he speaks of it often, where he says, I would yearn for what everybody else had. And it
yeah.
made him feel not only unloved, but not part of the group, and that there was something
Mm,
wrong with him, which is a common retort to, why am I not getting this? Well, it must be on you.
yeah. Great point. Yeah. And actually, that makes me think of what I should say is either point number 7 or 6A, and that is religious diversity. I happen to be someone who tries to follow Jesus. I consider myself a Christian in that sense. But I don't think that Christians are the only ones with truth. I don't think Christians are the only one with access to God. You would think, though, that if God was omnipotent and there was just one true right way to think, God would make it crystal clear and it would be obvious that all the other religions are false. But in reality, it seems like all kinds of truth is in other religious traditions. I'm a part of the
Mhm.
Christian one. That's the one I prefer. But I have no problem thinking that my Jewish, my Buddhist, etc. friends have access to God.
Yeah, I mean, there literally is not one of anything on this planet or in our existence in the universe or anything. So to claim that there is only one way to something that created all of us
Mm,
is just such small thinking. It's truly tribal.
yeah.
And it goes back to the my God is better than your God.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I mean, we used to say that on the school playgrounds. My daddy's better than your daddy.
Yeah.
And we're still just bratty children trying to prove that we are the right ones and that God loves us the most.
Yeah. I wonder I'm sure psychologists of religion have teased this out, but this desire that we have to be right, to be on the right team, to have the answers. I mean, I don't want to
It's
point
pure
fingers
ego.
because I have some of that myself. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to be on the wrong team.
No.
Um, and but we take it to such an extreme, we forget to be humble that we don't have all the answers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's antichrist.
Good point.
I mean, it really is because
Yeah.
of the levels. I mean, you said you follow Jesus. He's still my main guy
Yeah.
because of his inclusivity, because of his flipping off the powerful, because of calling them vipers, because of
Yeah.
putting everything down and saying, no, only love matters. What
Yeah.
we've done to Christianity is exactly what he fought.
Hmm. I
So, I
agree with
mean,
you.
without that love, without that, it's pure ego. I get into this in my book because when the ego comes in, love can't exist. We have
Hmm.
to be right, and the ego is the antithesis of what we claim God would be, or
Yeah. I
God
like
should be worthy enough for us to worship something like that.
I like that. I'm embarrassed to say I haven't read your book.
It's not
I
out
need
yet.
to. Oh, there, it makes me feel better.
We're talking after the show.
Okay.
No one has read it yet, so
Okay,
it's
good. It makes me feel better.
close. So
Uh,
what sparked your need to write this book?
well, um, I have been saying for quite a few years that the Bible does not portray God as all controlling. It
Hmm.
does sometimes portray God as unloving. I
Yeah.
admit that. But we have come to the Bible assuming God can be or is all controlling, omnipotent. And I've been saying that for a while. But as I started doing some real deep research, I realized that even the English word almighty that you find in English translations of scripture are based on mistranslations. In the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, there are two words. One is Shaddai, and the other one is Sabaoth, from which we get the word Almighty. And Shaddai means breasts or mountains,
Hmm.
and God is portrayed as the breasted one, the one who nourishes, or one of mountains who protects and uh, or as Sabaoth, which means hosts, as in the Lord of hosts or the God of the council. These two words, hosts and breasts, were translated in the Septuagint as the word Pantocrator, which means something
Hmm.
like all holding. And we get this then in the New Testament 10 times, and it's translated Almighty there as well, even though, again, it's based on mistranslations. And then in about the fourth or fifth century, or whenever, I can't remember the exact century. Anyway, when Jerome is translating scripture into
Hmm.
Latin, he comes up with the word omnipotent. that goes in the creeds, and Christians and Jews ever since have said God is omnipotent, all based back to mistranslations of the Hebrew words. I thought people needed to know that story.
Most definitely. And I just posted this week on Facebook that in general I have a problem with power. And
Mm.
I don't think that you can be almighty and all holy.
Mm.
Because I mean, I think of the humans that we now have to look at. Putin, pretty
Yeah.
powerful. He could be called almighty. He's not holy in any way, shape, or form. Right? So how do
Yep.
you be powerful and holy at the same time? Though that's another contradiction, right?
Yep. What Christians have said through all the through ages is somehow God can be almighty, all holy, and all loving, but it's a mystery. God's beyond it. And I'm saying I'm
Yeah.
with you. Nope, that's not a mystery. I think we need to affirm. I think we need to get rid of the Almighty One.
Yeah. Because again, when I think of might, I think of swords, wars,
Yep.
those, destruction, um, not internal strength, not empathy. When I think of might, I think of evil,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
as a start too, if not fully encapsulated. Um, so when I think of holy, I think of loving, empathy, being with something, and yeah, those totally contradict each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the way you're going there. I tend to like to distinguish between love that empowers others
Hmm.
versus omnipotence that overpowers others.
Oh wow, yes,
And I'm against the latter and in favor of the
yeah.
former.
Well, and when you get that overpoweringness, that's when abuse comes in. That's when you're a piece of shit. You were born a piece of shit. You're
Ex-
unworthy, and all of the insecurities that brew because of that theology.
exactly. And I suspect that's what Putin is thinking right now.
Yeah.
That he wants to overpower Ukraine because he has to have his way. And,
Well, he
and
actually said yesterday that it's our fault.
oh, really? Okay.
Another thing with power, they always blame someone else. They never take ownership of it. I'm always onus on us.
Oh.
So, what happens to someone who picks up your book, albeit begrudgingly, and then realizes, holy crap, I need to probably let go of this omnipotence?
Yeah, it's going to be scary for them at first. At least it was for most people. For a lot of people, omnipotence has kind of been their security blanket. They've
Yeah.
wanted to believe that God is loving. They've wanted to believe that creaturely freedom matters, that our choices make a difference, that we have a role to play. But they've kind of kept that omnipotence in the default mode in their hip pocket, just in case the argument gets rough and they need God to yank them out of some sort of problem. If you take my book and read it carefully, you'll find out that there's not biblical support for omnipotence.
No.
There's not good philosophical support. I have a chapter called Dying the Death of a Thousand Qualifications, in which I point out that even the most conservative thinkers have qualified what they mean by omnipotence, and they qualify it to death. Anyhow, and what they're going to have to come to grips with is God. If God's not omnipotent, then how do we make sense of reality? What does it make sense? What does it mean to say you believe in God? And that's what I try to give them in the last chapter, this God of amipotence, a God of uncontrolling love.
Yeah, because I mean, when I think of my highest self, it's all love.
Mm,
It's being able to understand when my neighbors are assholes. It's being
mm,
able to understand that someone is in a rush and that's why they just cut me off on the road.
mm.
Not my reactionary self that goes, "You
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
fucker."
But
I'm
what I like,
proud.
yeah, I like that you're putting that out there because some people think that love means, well, everything is good. Life is just
No,
grand. If you put on the right
no,
pair of glasses, you find out your neighbor is just perfect after all. And that's
no.
just, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm saying life does suck sometimes. There's
Oh, yeah.
real evil in the world. And the question is, how do we think about God's activity in the world and then our response to what God might be calling us to do in light of the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Okay, so I foresee a problem. You're going to run into the same things I do where people go, no, I don't want to have to do anything. No,
Yeah.
my beliefs are enough. I go to church on Sunday. That, you're telling me that I'm going to have to do something, and that's just too much for me.
Yeah, I know some people think like that. I mean, if they really thought about it very long, they'd realize that that's not a wise way to try to live. And I mean,
No,
they don't really hold their children to that standard,
uh, let's
and
hope
they
not.
don't. Yeah, they don't hold themselves to that. So maybe this is another. Maybe I should have led with this. The ideas that I'm presenting in this book and most of my books are ideas that I think make sense given the real world we live in. Some theologies kind of seem like they're floating in from outer space and proposing ideas that don't really fit the way the world works. I think about theology differently. I work from the bottom up. I work from the way life seems to be and
Yeah.
then make speculations about this God of love.
Yeah. I don't believe that something so powerful, so holy, so loving would break their own rules too. I
Mm,
mean, when you look at nature and you see all of these things we don't understand, we still don't even know everything that's on this planet,
sure. Oh, man.
but
Yeah.
we claim to know everything about God that we've never seen, never, or heard of, or, just all through stories. So to say, I'm open to these types of things, I'm open to something better than I have believed, because the
Mm,
God that I believed in before was small. He was an
yeah.
asshole. He
Yep.
was mean, and he was abusive.
Yep.
And now that I've dropped that doctrine, realizing it's just men trying to understand the world around us, I am so much more free, so much more willing to learn, and so much more loving. I was never taught to love because Jesus
Mm,
did that. We didn't have to.
yeah. Yeah. I realize I should have had a subtitle on this book. You've just given it to me. It should
Okay,
have been
good.
called The Death of Omnipotence and Birth of Amipotence: Why God Isn't an Asshole.
Perfect. I'll expect the reprint out soon
That sounds good.
with credit. So,
Uh,
killing off the omnipotence beliefs,
yeah.
how can people find more love, and how can we teach them to be more loving? Because I think that's the whole purpose, right?
Yeah. Well, I think there's some things that go on subconsciously in a lot of people when it comes to God's power and love. And the subconscious thing is, I think a lot of us, maybe not everybody, but a lot of us intuitively align our lives with what we think is ultimate, God in this case. And if what we think is ultimate or best or worship worthy is control, then we'll probably try to control others, or we'll at least justify our control of others by saying we're like God. I mean, may not say that explicitly, but
Yeah,
that's basically what we're doing. But if we think the ultimate one, this God that I happen to believe in, is an uncontrolling, loving individual who's empowering rather than overpowering, and we then try to model our lives after that, boy, that changes the way we act
totally.
toward our partners, toward our enemies, toward everyone in our world. And I think that's a radical shift in consciousness.
Well, again, it puts the onus on us, but it also takes the word better out of your vocabulary,
Mm,
because you're not trying to be better than someone else. You're not
mm,
trying to be better, period. You're trying to be more loving.
yeah.
So, and better is so subjective, right? We have people who think that they're better because of their race or their occupation or all of these things where they still bring God in as their power.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no love in there at all.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, the KKK believes that they are ordained by God and that they have all the power, and there is no love there.
Great point. Great point. Yeah. I mean, I think the comparison thing is something we all, well, I won't speak for everybody, but lots of people I know, including myself, have struggled with that.
Yeah,
Because on the one hand, part of our moral development is looking at how other people act and trying to mimic what we think is valuable. But the problem is that when we do that, we oftentimes suffer from comparison. And
mm,
when, we think of ourselves as so much better when we're doing better than our next door neighbor or worse,
back to
etc.
ego.
Yeah. We don't remember that God calls us, I think, moment by moment to love given who we are and the situation we're in. And that's always going to be unique to us. There might be some similarities to other people. We might find some help when we look to exemplars, but everything's going to come back to who am I in my situation, my history, my gifts, my opportunities. That's where love calls us to do what's unique for each of us.
And those will be the questions that we are asked when we get to the pearly gates. What did you do? What did you love? Not,
Uh,
did you know Sarah was gay and you let her be gay without bitching her out? Or someone had sex in your building and you weren't praying for them while they were doing it. I mean, all of the things that so many religions focus on other people as
yeah.
opposed to fix yourself, fool. That's what this is for. Take it
I
out of your
love it.
eye, take, what is it? Take the board out of your eye before you even look at the speck of someone else's. As I
Yeah.
was getting ready, the old TLC song, the song about sex, don't worry about your business. And it was like from the 90s, and I'm rocking out going, yeah, it's none of your business. Still,
I
again, be
love it.
more loving, not better.
Yep. Yep. I mean, that's part of, I think, as humans, it's easier for us, at least we think it's easier, to have a set of rules that we're going to try to follow.
It
Because if
is
we have
easier.
rules, we don't have to think too much about it. We may not
Exactly.
like them, but, there they are in black and white, supposedly. But the real world isn't black and white, and there's
No.
always going to be gray areas. And so it's a higher calling to live a life of love than it is to try to obey all the rules that someone gives you.
And it's not easy,
No, it's not. No,
but it's worth it,
it's better than the alternative.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I would much rather be hated for loving than loving the hated.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what do you want people to get out when they put this book down? What do you want them to say?
Well, this book has kind of speak to different people in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who really love the Bible, they're going to read the Bible section. They're going to go, "What? I didn't know that," and it's going to blow their minds. There's another set of people who are like real analytic philosophers. They're going to read that section and go, "Whoa, I hadn't thought of it like that." Um, I think, though, the part of the book that I'm hoping most people really sort of dig their teeth into and start reflecting deeply on is the final portion in which I lay out what it might be like for this universal spirit of love to be active in the world
Mm,
and how our response and this response of creation really makes an ultimate difference. Um,
yeah.
that's a theme I probably should have even hammered harder, but it's a theme that says if God's not omnipotent, your life matters. If God is, probably not. And I think
Then we're
that's an
just
important.
ants.
We are right. Yep. Um, that's a really important message, I think.
Yeah, Steve Slocum, I don't know if you know him. He actually introduced me to the we're just ants
Oh,
philosophy. And at first I got really angry.
Yeah.
And then I started really considering it. And then I was like, no, we're not ants. They're more organized than we are.
I
They're more
love it.
communal. They know how to get shit done. We
Yeah.
can't do any of that.
Well, when I was growing up, it was called worm theology from Martin Luther's hymn about, such a worm as I. And it was sort of like, we have nothing to contribute because we're all sorry sinners, totally depraved, heading for hell. We can do nothing but sin every day in word, deed, and thought. And this holy God doesn't really need us or even want us. But thank God Jesus came along and convinced this mean old God to like us. That was the theology that
Yeah.
people gave me, and that's just not good theology.
It's so destructive. It is so destructive. And I mean, where does it leave you as a person to believe that? If there's no aspiration, it's always, well, I'm just, not lovable, but thank God he loves me.
Yep.
There's nothing, there's no redemption in that. People say that Jesus is the redemption, but Jesus wasn't around for thousands of years before. And a lot of people don't know his name. So again, it's that
Yeah.
redemption. It's that love. You can talk to someone that has been in a tribe for centuries, that doesn't know the Bible, that doesn't know anything, but they will say that they love their partner or their
Mm.
children or those types of things.
Yep.
So the religion that we have that makes us so flawed, I think, is part of all of the insecurity that's going on right now in our world.
Yeah, good point. I sure like your emphasis upon love. Man, you and I are compatico.
Yes, most definitely. It is a hard thing. In fact, I was thinking about it today about, because so many people preach what they're not. It's
Mm,
like, and you have politicians rallying against the LGBT community while hitting up the same sex people on Instagram or in
mhm.
bathrooms or something to that effect. And I always put myself in check and like, okay, what am I doing here? And I thought today about love because that
Good.
is my message.
Yep.
And it is openly, it's something that I struggle with. It's really, really hard. And it's
Mm,
it's hard to maintain it. It's hard to think of it when you're angry. All of those things that come forward. It's the only thing that I know off to go on. And I'm by far not even remotely perfect,
mm.
or always
Yeah.
loving, but I try. At least I know that that's the way to go now.
Yeah. Me too. That's my aim. And I'm like you. I wouldn't say I always do it, but if love is about promoting well-being and my well-being is part of the whole that's being promoted, then loving is actually what's good for me in the universe. I think it's even good for God. So you know I'm also get angry sometimes, and I have to ask, okay, what does my anger look like, and how can it be a healthy anger, and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. um, but I share the same goal that you seem to have, to live a life of love.
And to help those who can't help themselves.
Sure.
I mean, it's, if God is the ultimate parent, then God would only want all of his children to get along and love each other.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, parents of multiple children, they would just dream of having their children love each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if there is a higher power, if there is a God out there, why would he want anything less?
Yeah. I've been struggling with that just in the last 3 weeks or so. My daughter and I co-edited a book called "Why the Church of the Nazarene Should Be Fully LGBTQ plus Affirming."
Mm,
It's a 500-page book with 90 some contributors, and I'm a part of a denomination that is not affirming. And so the response has been quite varied. Some people are thrilled, other people say I'm the Antichrist. And trying to figure out the most loving response to that diversity is difficult, especially when people send me notes saying that I'm leading people to hell and all that sort of thing.
oh yeah, I got in on one of those conversations a couple weeks ago.
Did you? Yeah. Uh,
I stood up for you. I was like, whoa, no, back off.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Like, the empathetic part side of me wants to empathize with people because I used to
Yeah.
have a similar idea.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I'm constantly trying to think to myself, okay, what's the most appropriate response given what little I know about some of these people, on social media. And that's difficult.
It is. I mean, a lot of times my initial reaction to this is the most loving is something that I end up going, no, that really wasn't.
Mm, mm,
Without that consciousness, without that thought, without
yeah,
taking myself out of the emotions of the anger or the fear or
yeah,
whatever it is. Because I mean, like recently I did something, I screwed up. I totally screwed up. I thought I was doing the right thing. And then after it all transpired, I was like, you know what? That wasn't the right thing.
yeah,
I did it when I thought it was. And that's the reason I did it. But if I would have given it even maybe a couple minutes of more thought, I would have went, no, there's a better way of handling this.
yeah. I can totally relate to that. Yep.
A learning experience for me that I'm trying to implement. But it goes back to reactionary and responses, and we are a reactionary animal. We've had to be in order to survive. We've had to run,
Yeah.
we've had to fear, we've had to do all of those things. Now those fears have become towards our neighbor,
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
so than they've ever been.
And I think that's part of what I'm learning to believe that my emotions aren't evil. So
Yeah,
that if someone says something that's hurtful to me and I'm angry, there's nothing wrong with that. I
no.
can be angry.
Hmm.
If I'm hurt, that's fine. It's what I do in response that I'm trying to get better
Totally.
at.
Yeah. I've always said that. No matter what you feel, no matter what it is, it's how you respond to, and that's what you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Okay, we are almost at the top of the hour. I want to show your book.
Oh.
Go buy
Oh,
it,
thank
everyone.
you.
It is a quick read. It's a good read. It's very in depth, but you can get through it. So, what are your final words, and where can people find you?
My final words are my ultimate aim in life is to live a life of love. And this particular book is a way of talking about God's power that shows what I think has been the misconceptions of omnipotence and offers a constructive replacement that I've called amipotence. Um,
Love it.
yeah, you can find it on all online booksellers, whatever. Um,
Let me show it again so everybody knows what they're looking for. I have your website up here,
oh, thank you.
and you also do a podcast, which is Oort Shorts.
Yeah, very different kind of podcast. 3-minute episodes.
Really?
Yes, 3 minutes. Boom,
I
boom,
would
boom.
love to be able to be that concise.
It's hard work, actually.
Yeah, I bet. Jennifer does one that's like under 5 minutes too. I'm always like, girl, how can you get that done that quickly? I need an hour to talk to these people.
I love it.
And then everybody can find you on Facebook and your website. Are you on any other social?
Twitter, Facebook, Instagram from time to time. I'm more consistent on Twitter and Facebook, though.
Yeah, I've been adding everybody's links to the advertisements on Facebook, and
Oh,
they haven't allowed me to do so in the last 2 weeks. So Facebook is doing
okay.
something weird right now.
Hmm.
Tom, it is always a pleasure talking to
Oh,
you. Thank you
thank
so
you,
much.
Sherry.
And everybody, go buy the book. It is fabulous, and you can only increase your amount of love by doing so.
Thank you, Sherry.
I'm going to send you backstage and close the show. Thank you so much. I hope you got a lot out of that. Anything that would draw us closer to being more loving, teaching us how to get God out of the box of all of our fears and just plain wrong doctrine that's contradictory and confuses the process of love should be ditched. We should learn a new way. Let's get on it and go get his book. Thomas is great. I will see you next week. And no matter what, you always know, walk in love. Have a great week. Mwah! Bye.